Ukraine is a resilient place. Certainly Ukraine is going to benefit arguably above all other countries, potentially from being what we call near-shoring. There's going to be sort of selective success and selective difficulty. It's a higher risk environment, but the returns are potentially higher as well. But this is the problem with Ukraine. Nobody really knows. We take the roller coaster that is Ukrainian real estate, jumped on the train with everything I owned from Moscow and arrived in
Nick, hello, good morning, good afternoon. Now it's Tuesday afternoon after 4th of July. Welcome to Don't Ever Give Up show.
Thank you very much, Henry. It's good to be here.
Good. Thank you again for being on the show. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about real estate in Ukraine and the global trends, but we want our audience to know all about you and how you started and how you got where you are, why you're in Ukraine. So please.
Goodness me, a long story. I started off my career in Eastern Europe. I took the plunge and left the UK and went to Moscow without ever actually having seen it. I was offered a job there with Z, and I arrived in I think October 1998, so just a few weeks after the financial meltdown. Wasn't the best time to arrive. Struggled through 6 months in Moscow, and then I was transferred to Kiev. So I followed my normal path, and I jumped on the train with everything I owned from Moscow and arrived in Kiev and felt, it's actually quite nice. So here I am.
How long ago was that?
That was, I came here in March 99.
And I remember you old 99. That's unbelievable. And you've been permanently here since then.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow,
they let me out occasionally for a week or two,
Well, you're unique, yes, in many different ways. Just not, I don't know, actually, I don't know anybody who's been here, a foreigner who's been here that long from 99 and still here in 2020. So congratulations, it's 21 years. You're legally allowed to drink now, but Ukraine is in any case, obviously you spent most of your career in real estate and some associated with real estate. How did you start in Kiev? I know it was a smaller firm than the global one you deal now.
Yeah, I mean, when I came to Kiev, the business was then DTZ. DTZ and Cushman Wakefield merged about 4 years ago now. So I came here under the legacy DTZ brand, and the office was then owned by Korvan Zadelhoff, who also personally owned a portfolio of offices here in Kiev. So really the office back in 99 was very much focused around the management of his portfolio, the leasing and the management of his portfolio. So I came in, my background is property management, so I came in to sort of take over that. And then over the years, we've added on, different skill groups to the business. We started with valuation, then we did research development consultancy, then we added in logistics leasing, retail leasing consultancy. The offices was always there, so we sort of grew that out. And capital markets, and here we are today. Rebranded 3 years ago to Cushman Wakefield, and we take the roller coaster that is Ukrainian real estate.
Well, this is what I want to actually talk about before we get to Cushman Wakefield in more detail. Now, I wanted to maybe you can share your experience seeing this over the last 21 years. The Ukrainian market. I want you to describe for people, especially foreigners that might be looking at Ukraine, and describe that roller coaster. And it was a roller coaster, clearly.
It has been a roller coaster. It's been a market. Often it's taken a lag from global trends. So there's been an opportunity really that when the global markets are a bit more bearish, then the Ukraine markets tended to be a bit more bullish, because there's been opportunities for very speculative approaches to the market. Going back to sort of between when I came in 99 and certainly 2003, there was a real opportunity to acquire some rather underpriced assets. And that's when a number of foreign developers came in. Then as the markets improved, let's say from 2004 through to 2008, There was, I wouldn't say there was institutional investors, so we've not seen the German funds, the British, the American funds coming in, but there was a lot more family funds came in, people like, people like London and Regional,
Sure.
Meyer Bergman. So they came in taking, a little bit more risk in a rising market. The market obviously took a tilt in 2009, but then it's slowly recovered. And then, of course, we had the situation 2013, 14, 15. That's given opportunity for, again, reinvestment at underpriced assets. And that certainly happened 2015, 16, 17, and then the market, really rose up again. And now we're at a point post-COVID or mid-COVID, I guess, where there's a higher degree of uncertainty. I mean, the actual fundamentals of Ukraine still look relatively good, although more recently there's been a lot of questions about the political direction of the country. But as of today, the financial position of the country looks relatively stable. Whether that, but this is the problem with Ukraine. Nobody really knows. But I think you've got to take a step back, and when you see how much debt Western countries are now taking in fighting COVID, and we're talking, hundreds of billions of dollars of country debt that they're taking. When you actually look at it, Ukraine's debt is actually relatively low.
It's about 60% of GDP.
It can be relatively well managed, and it's coming from a very low level of GDP. And, assuming that, the government can enable business to stabilize and then grow again. Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity for Ukraine to come out of that. So at the moment, we're seeing the market is one of sort of wait and see, and we're seeing that certainly from investors. The investors have always been very opportunistic here, so they're taking a very opportunistic approach towards pricing, and they're making revised offers on investment opportunities which are materially less than they were 6 months ago. Developers are still by and large progressing with their intended deliveries, both in offices, retail, and in logistics. One of the issues here is always procurement of development finance, but there are now much more avenues towards development finance, from such things as KUKE, which is the Polish Export Guarantee Fund, but also EBRD, etc., are also now much more actively looking at sustainable real estate financing. So there are opportunities, and also the local banks are now starting real estate finance. The problem there is that it tends to be relatively short-term finance, and of course, real estate you need a longer term.
You need 10 years plus at least. But Nick, in your response to my question, it seems like there's a 5-year cycles, the way it laid out to be, that constantly goes into which are much shorter cycles in other countries, right? I think this is.
Yeah, I mean, there are more externalities for Ukraine. Obviously the situation in 2013 and 14 was very much caused by entirely external influences. Obviously.
It's a pandemic now is external influence in a way as well.
You could say that, or let's say it's an unknown influence. It's an unexpected influence of COVID.
Yes.
So, it's a higher risk environment, but the returns are potentially higher as well.
Well, let's talk about the financing part, and we'll come back to the operating and management of real estate. But we now see the National Bank of Ukraine is lowered the prime rate to about somewhere about 8%, I believe now, and target is somewhere at 6%, which hopefully will open up the mortgage market for commercial real estate and residential real estate. What's your view on that in terms of how is banks going to react to much lower prime rate?
Well, I think certainly on the residential side, I think already that's going to start to stimulate the market. If people feel that they can take medium-term mortgages, at a much lower rate. I mean, we were talking 20% interest
Yeah, I
rates
mean,
a few
compared
years
to
ago.
US, this
Now,
is astronomical rate still, but right, where the US is zero,
now,
right?
if you can now get 10%, then particularly if it's fixed income, then that's going to give a lot more confidence towards people entering the residential market. In terms of commercial real estate, as I say, I mean, the problem is that the debt tends to be relatively short term still. So there are opportunities for refinancing, and I think that's the start of the curve. If people can refinance, then that's going to release some liquidity, and that will enable them then to potentially develop and so on and so forth. So it's a start.
But
we've
if
still
you're,
got a long way
Nick, if you're a financial institution and you are providing short-term mortgages in a way, right? The reason you're providing short-term because you have a very low visibility long-term. Coming back to the political stability of the country, am I wrong in us making that assumption?
I mean, I'm no banker. I think that's certainly a factor, but I think it's also the fact that that there aren't really long-term deposits that are being made in Ukraine. Unless the bank have got long-term deposits, then they're to a degree constrained in how long-term they can make their loans.
Okay.
Because the banks are still relatively underfinanced, so they can't expose themselves to too much risk. So when you're looking at commercial developments, a shopping centre might cost anything from, let's say, 60 to 150 million US to build. So they can really only expose themselves to relatively small degrees of debt from the local market.
Okay.
So that's really the constraint. With residential, it's much easier. I mean, residential is developed and sold initially off plan and then through the development process, and then it's turned. There's much more liquidity and therefore less need for the longer term finance. You build a shopping centre, you've got to hold it for 3 or 4 years before it matures, before you can then turn it over as an investment product. So, and plus there's a 2-year development period. So you might be looking at a minimum 5-year financing period for retail, and that's difficult to secure.
So let's talk about what's happening now, and we see this already in actual demonstration of examples of public-private partnerships. Do you think that law that is about to be implemented, I should say, how this can impact the development for the commercial properties where a particular municipality provides the land and becomes a partner in a deal? Do you see this making an impact on commercial real estate in Ukraine?
I think inevitably in the long term it will. I think the concern is that Ukraine always has a very fast-moving political agenda.
Call it fast-moving lack of political agenda, but we'll go with your line.
What is agreed and implemented today? I think the general view is may be challenged tomorrow. There have been different legislations introduced. We were all very excited in 2012 about the industrial parks initiative, which would give, tax relief for, the development of industrial manufacturing, et cetera, and it's never actually impacted materially on the development of industrial parks, because, there's a view, well, what's agreed today, will it be in place tomorrow? And when we see what's been happening, on things like solar farms, wind farms, where the power allowances and subsidies have all of a sudden been readdressed by the government. These sort of changes in position don't give the confidence.
It's all about trust, isn't it? Actually, speaking about solar business, I spoke to Sergei Savchuk, who is former head of energy efficiency agency. We had an interview as well. And he talked about this balance between alternative source of energy that caused this major shift to solar and such a big cost of solar to the government, which was unfair pricing period. But yes, going back on your word on the government level, on any level, is a major trust issue. And I think this is a issue of confidence in Ukraine as a place where you can stably invest. Knowing that, we have a major law about to be passed, gambling, right? Which hopefully, in my opinion, similar to what intended with Sparkles, will bring a lot of big casino operators. I just received a letter of intent from one to develop resort-like casinos in Ukraine, which is going to be magnet to tourism. So what do you think the impact of that law will be on the development of those large, small cities, college style of US tourism?
I think it could be quite profound. I mean, when we see, the impact of casinos in Georgia, that really has driven the most large-scale hospitality development. So, I think that the casino law would certainly stimulate development, development of hotels. Now, that could be, certainly in the Kiev Oblast, but also certainly down to the Black Sea as well. So,
well, in the west of Ukraine too, it's a beautiful part of the country.
And possibly the west as well, yeah. It will stimulate, tourism. It will stimulate the hotel developments, therefore the airports and so on and so forth. So, I think it's a fine opportunity. I hope the government don't waste it. That the development of casinos needs to be managed. What we don't want to see, as we saw, goodness, going back now, 10, 15 years ago, there was almost a casino on every street corner, which were just money laundering debts.
Right.
They need to be fully controlled. They need to be fully taxed so as to bring in revenue for the government. And only with control, can you actually create, environs in which are focused towards the casino, and therefore all of the added on leisure and amenity functions and the employment that can generate. So, if they do it right, it can be, I wouldn't say it's a game changer for the country, but if you do it right, it can certainly generate a lot of development, investment, and revenue.
Well, the casinos, statistically from Vegas to Macau, demonstrated an enormous cascading event, cascading a multiple effect on job creation and income tax generation and so on. And Ukraine definitely needs that across the board. And I think you can attach medical tourism to that function of hospitality, which will make very attractive country as Ukraine as a country for tourists coming from all over the world.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, medical tourism, does exist in Ukraine, and it is increasing. So I think that's a good bolt-on to the whole hospitality promotion. Yeah.
So with the pandemic, we clearly see changes in office used by the companies. We see changes in retail malls, where I actually had a conversation with one major mall developer here, because how can I convert my mall into co-working like style? So what do you see those trends go in terms of use of office space and use of retail space after the pandemic experience we all just have or continue to have?
Okay, we've looked at many models, and I certainly invite you to go into the Cushman Wakefield global website, where Cushman Wakefield have undertaken research, I think 45,000 feed-ins from various office occupiers globally. And I think it gives some very interesting telling how different businesses are looking at their medium to long-term strategies in very different ways. And sometimes even the same businesses, are, or let's say the same industries, let's say banking, there's the different banks have a very different view as to how they're going to operate going forward. Like Goldman Sachs have a very, very strong corporate culture, and they are very much driven towards saying, no, we want people back in the office. We want everybody, to take back the collaborative culture that we've got. Other banks are saying, well, actually, we're not so sensitive to that, and we think that we can maybe have a system of, having offices, but maybe people coming in 2 days a week on rota, and so on and so forth. What's been driving the Ukrainian office market, certainly for the last 3 years, is IT development and programming. And that's been a massive impact. I mean, over 30% for the last 3 or 4 years of all office take-up has been IT. Now, again, the IT industry, and we advise and work for a lot of them, they are still undecided as to what to do, largely. And most of them are saying, listen, we're taking a stop here. Most of the risks to their business models of widespread illness is just too high to even contemplate. So a majority of the IT industry are still maintaining home working. I don't think it's for them it is ideal, but they just don't know where they're going to go. Now, when let's assume that in due course, whether it's this year, next year, or even the year after, there is a vaccine, and then let's say that we can look back on COVID as history. Then I think the decisions are going to be, look, what was this experience? Is this a way that we can operate going forward? Not so much saving office rent costs, but is this actually a better way of attracting and retaining talent, that we give people the opportunity to work from home? Now, very few companies are going to say, look, work from home, we'll see you once a year at the Christmas party. That's not what it's about. My view is it's going to go more towards what we would call hot desking, where people come into the office 2 or 3 days a week, which means that the office can then be of a smaller scale. On the flip side of that, but this is very much a COVID thing, that again, look at the Cushman's website and you'll see our paper on what's called a 6-foot office, where office designs have been changed so that people sit no closer than 6 foot or 1.5 meters apart, and there's perspex screens and everything else. Pardon?
Are we back to cubicles?
No, not back to cubicles. No, I mean, this 6-foot office is an open plan concept, but keeping distance of people and having, let's say, walk routes, everything else. So, if there is infection within an office, it simply mitigates to a degree the level of a likely infection between staff. So, I think there's going to be a push towards less dense occupation of space. Now, will that outweigh the potential that people are going to start having a slightly more flexible approach towards working from home? I mean, some people like working from home. I think what we've found through the research is that a majority of people do actually miss the working environment. That doesn't mean they want to be here 5 days a week.
Right.
I think most people would prefer 2 or 3 days a week in the office. Now, some functions, can operate very well out of the office. And again, the Cushman's research paper will show you this. Certainly some of the back administration, marketing, PR, human resources can actually work quite well externally. So it's a whole changing thing. And, when we look at, let's say in the UK, how this is panning out, some of the bigger banks are saying, well, actually, rather than having everybody using public transport to come into a major city like London and work from an office tower, listen, guys, we've got so much underutilized real estate through our branch network all over the cities, all over the country.
Yeah.
So actually, some of the banks saying, listen, rather than you drive an hour and a half to work or using public transport, which of course increases infection risks, let's start delivering offices in our branches that are effectively hot desks. So, if you've got some business in Leeds, you go to Leeds and you sit in a branch in Leeds, or Manchester or York or wherever you want to be. So, these are new changing models. So, it's interesting. It's difficult to say what's going to happen in Kiev. In Kiev, we approached this pandemic with around about less than 5% vacancy in the office market. So we had a very, very low level of vacancy. I personally see us coming out of this, and when I'm saying coming out, maybe October this year. If there's a second wave, or if this first wave continues, it may be spring next year. Mm-hmm. I would have anticipated around between 10 and 20, so maybe 15% vacancy, as and when we sort of start to move forward.
Not detrimental. It's obviously a hit, but it's not a major hit.
No, I mean, listen, we've had 25% vacancy before. I think it's going to be it's not going to be too serious. It's going to be tough.
But let me ask you a question. Obviously, the tougher market is in retail space, right? So you see, there's a couple 100,000 square meters are coming out of retail space in Kyiv altogether within the next year or two, I believe. That space is changing in terms of usability.
Good. Well, what's happening in the retail market? I mean, in terms of the new large malls that are being delivered, I mean, they certainly are presently suffering in terms of securing their tenants, because you've got to remember that when you build a retail mall, it is invariably the tenants that do their capital fit out works. You may, with some of your absolute key anchors, whether it's Inditex or whatever, the landlord may have to, and typically, has had to, even in the past, make contributions. But a majority of your space will be fitted out by the brands themselves. And of course, the retail market has suffered. Most of these brands, and particularly in Ukraine, where they are very largely franchised, there's not sufficient capital to fit out, multiple units. So the brands have to be very, very selective in which malls they go to. And of course, there's a sheep mentality, because nobody wants to be the only brand in an empty mall. So, they're really getting together and saying, well, look, yeah, you're going to go there, you're our competitor, but there's a synergy, we need to be with you. So, I think there's going to be sort of selective success and selective difficulty. I think where there are more opportunities, I think, is in the regional cities, where the malls are typically smaller, and they can more easily service, let's say, neighborhoods. So there's been some very successful smaller neighborhood malls, even in Kiev, with the likes of Smart Plaza, which is a fantastic concept. Yep. They're neighborhood malls, they've got retail offering, but they've got a much relatively higher offering of let's say, social functions, eateries, etc., etc. So, and they've also got the flexibility that they can also then incorporate office type uses like co-working, so on and so forth. So, I think there's going to be a move of malls more towards, and at the moment, food courts are effectively all shut down, but I think again people will start to, post-COVID, will start to move more towards let's say the more social elements of malls.
So the malls malls are generally becoming a community center of sort, yeah, from teenager to senior citizen, right? So, and this is what I think the transformation is going to happen with retail mall. You're going to see much more experience like providers or tenants versus just the retail tenants themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely right. But also, you've got to remember that in the UK, I'm from the UK, so it's always easier for me to refer to the UK. Pre-COVID, in the UK, there was around about 20% of all retail trade was e-commerce. Mm-hmm. 20%. Now that varied across Europe. The UK was about the highest. In Italy, where people are, let's say they're much more, I wouldn't say small, I can say social, let's say, it was much lower. It was about 6 or 7%. In Ukraine, it was relatively low also. We were talking about 5%. Now, I think what the pandemic has done, it's been something of a catalyst over the course of the last 3 or 4 months towards e-commerce. People that may not have considered it before have now used it, and and I think a high degree of those will now say, oh, actually it works. I didn't my bank details weren't stolen, and the product arrived at my doorstep. So I'm not saying everybody's going to remain on e-commerce, but I think that's going to be, I think it certainly catalyzed, it's accelerated the use of e-commerce. I mean, Ukraine, we're seeing that, certainly in the logistics market now, where, we're actually quite busy in logistics because the likes of Rosetta and so forth, really do need more space, because e-commerce, requires much more logistics space and less retail space. So I think there's going to be less turnover. So shopping centres will, I think, become, there's always going to be retail trade in shopping centres, but I think more and more it's going to be where people will come in, try, test, change, and then go home and order online. And I think that's a move. And therefore, it becomes, shopping centres again become more of a social experience about, going out and girls like going together and trying on clothes and looking at each other and taking selfies. I mean, that's all part of the process of changing shopping patterns.
What's interesting about this trend been upcoming for a while. We can see it coming. I mean, Amazon, I think yesterday hit a $3,000 mark per share, right? So we saw this coming. I think the pandemic accelerated that move into that social theme. And Mick, so obviously it's a fascinating market. Again, we are in for turbulence. hopefully, again, the 5-year cycle you experience works. We're about hitting that. And it's fascinating, the whole story, your story, personal story, and the business story. It's fascinating. And I really hope that people will take a lot out of it because the market is going to shift. There's going to be tremendous opportunities in Ukraine related to gambling, related to different developments that are happening all over the country. I think Ukraine logistically positioned as best country in the world in order to take advantage of the need for logistic diversification by the major multinational corporations and flight from China, etc.
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, this is certainly something that Cushman's, again, at the global level have identified, that during COVID, it's been quite apparent that, some geographies, and I think, particularly looking at India, have not performed as well because their IT infrastructure outside of the CBD zones of the major cities is actually very low. People have not been able to work from home in India. Actually, in Ukraine, the IT infrastructure is actually quite strong, and therefore there has been quite a good ability to work from home. So, and also when we look at now, there's a lot more focus now on supply chains. Even in the UK, before COVID hit the UK, so let's say in early spring this year, January, February, March, there were big issues with the automotive industry because so much product was being sourced from China and it wasn't getting to the UK. So I think there's now much more awareness of the need to diversify your supply chains. And of course, where else would you go? You want to be, you may wish to avoid the high costs of the EU, but you want to be on the European border. And I think certainly Ukraine is going to benefit arguably above all other countries, potentially from being what we call nearshoring. And that's both for manufacturing, for assembly, but also for things like, call centers, shared office centers, and also IT development. So I think, as we go through over the course of the next, 2 years to 5 years, I think there's going to be a lot more attention in Ukraine in manufacturing and in the office market because of this opportunity of nearshoring, because
right.
you've got a large population, highly educated population, and a relatively low cost population as well. Yeah. So, all of those things tick all of those boxes. So, you have a
logistical infrastructure in place. They need to be revived, of course, but the country is geographically a godsend in terms of geographical location for distribution all over the world. So,
yeah.
Mika, one of the most fascinating, I mean, as you know, what I'm doing on the World Trade Center side is basically ability to take the brand of World Trade Center and to amplify message of Ukraine throughout the world. And obviously, one of the things that I need to do is to make sure that I can connect people interested in coming to Ukraine with people like yourself who actually do something for them on the ground. So I think that you and I will be collaborating a lot in the future and hopefully near future as well. So going into our last part of the interview, Nick, a couple of questions about the values. First and foremost, what is the most important values to you as a leader now of a global corporation at the regional level?
Goodness, I think it has to be, maintaining integrity. As I say, I've been here 21 years. We've had bull markets, bear markets. We've got to resist the temptation to follow that herd mentality, of over expectation in the bull markets and excess pessimism in the bear markets. Ukraine is a resilient place. Yeah, as we've said, it's got a large, highly motivated population, well-educated population with actually a very, very strong work ethic. Arguably, I think one of the biggest challenges facing Ukraine, as always, is the political situation, and I mean that on the internal level. But that's something that can be managed. So I think my overriding thing is integrity. If we don't believe in something, we'll tell our clients we don't believe this. Okay. Don't do it. Do something else.
Excellent.
even if that's not what they want to hear, that's what we
Well,
tell.
It's a very good phrase. It's the painful truth is still better than a lie, right? So, thank you. What are the 3 strengths of Nick Cutler?
Goodness. I think it's difficult to put them into single words. First would be an ability to sort of just get up every morning, look at the challenges of the day, and think, "Hey, it's just another day. Let's get through it." I think just let's get through it. I think the other one is team playing. I mean, we've got a team here of 30 people. I've been here 21 years. There's 3 of my team have been here longer than I have.
Wow.
But when I actually look around, most of the team have been with me, between 10 and 15 years. So, we've got a good collaborative team effort.
Well, for Ukraine, that's got to be a record somehow.
So we believe in investing in people and sharing the pain, and that's something we've had to do through COVID. We've had to take some, let's say, unpalatable decisions, but we've managed to maintain everybody, and we're getting through it as a team. So I think developing teamwork, I think, is absolutely essential.
Excellent. Well, last question of the day, Nick. If you were to summarize your life up to this interview, how would you describe it?
A roller coaster.
Ilya Ponomarev said the same thing, a roller coaster. Great answer. Again, I want to thank you. I want to wish you a lot of luck. Country needs your services, your firm, because this gives another credibility to Ukraine when a global firm of the stature is operating in the market and is not leaving the market, which is a big vote of confidence in a way. So, Nick, thank you.
We're here to stay.
I hope you enjoyed the interview.
Yeah, very much.
Thank you so much.